The next thing that we have in the topic of cross pollination is hydrophily. The name is quite descriptive in itself. Hydro means water, and we are dealing with cross pollination. So over here the transfer of pollen to the stigma of the genetically different flower will be brought about by the agency of water. What would be the different characteristic? The topic would be covering the same topics as subtopics as we had in the previous lecture, where we are going to see the characteristics of the flower, pollen grain and stigma, and a few sentences dealing with the examples where we come to know how the pollination takes place with reference to certain examples. So firstly we deal with what would be the characteristics of the flowers. Again over here we have an abiotic agency, so the flower need not to look attractive. So the flowers are often small and inconspicuous, they need not to attract anything, so they would be nectarless and odorless. Okay. Also the flower would be unwettable with its different floral parts. They cannot be wetted with water, then only its sustainability within the water would be ensured and it would be possible for the flower to carry out hydrophily. Now you have to keep one thing in mind, that most of the flowers, most of the genus of plants that we study, they are either pollinated by wind or they are pollinated by the insects. This particular cross pollination method is preferred by very few genus. Okay, there are as many as 70 genus only which prefer hydrophily. Rest of the flowers or rest of the genus, they prefer either the cross pollination that is carried out by insects, that is the most diverse one, animals I would say, and the second one is wind, and least ones are preferring water as the agent of pollination. Now coming to the pollen grains, what would be the characteristic of pollen grains? They would be light and unwettable. They would passively float in the water currents. Also one thing you have to keep in mind, that the submerged plants and completely submerged and partially submerged plants, they often have their anthers coming up, rising to the surface, and they dehiscize over there. Okay, they burst over there, then the pollens are released. The stigmas of the flowers are often elongated, highly elongated. So we have light and unwettable pollen grains. They are often long, filamentous. The filaments are as long as 2500 micrometers. So they have long filaments. They do not have exine. So the exine is often absent. The example is Zostera. Zostera is a water plant whose exine is absent. In most of the cases the pollens do not have exine. And one more characteristic feature is that they have same specific gravity as that of water. Same specific gravity as of water in which they are growing. This could be saline water, this could be fresh water, so they would have the same specific gravity, so that do not come onto the surface completely, but they remain inside the water but floating as well. They do not drown, they do not come to the surface, they should remain floating within the water, and that is enabled when the pollen grain is having the same specific gravity as that of the given water, depending what is its constitution. It could be saline water, it could be fresh water. So they are light and unwettable, and these are the three extra characteristics that you have to keep in mind. Moving further, what are the characteristics of stigma? Stigma would be long. As I told you, stigma often comes to the surface where the pollens are floating. So the stigma happens to be long, it has to be sticky, so that the unwettable pollen comes and sticks on it, and the stigma also has to be unwettable. So you can see that staying within the water, they have unwettable regions. So this is one characteristic that you have to keep in mind. Now there are two types of hydrophilies. One is hypohydrophily, another is epihydrophily. Supposedly this is the surface of water. In case the pollen is coming in contact with stigma under the water, that would be known as hypohydrophily. In case this activity, it happens like this, the stigma has reached till here, the long stigma, pollen is floating passively, it comes in contact with stigma like this with the passive current, then that condition is known as epihydrophily. So you have to keep these things in mind. Zostera is one example. It undergoes hypohydrophily. Keratophyllum is completely submerged water plant. It also undergoes hypohydrophily. The Vallisneria, which is the best example of hydrophily, undergoes epihydrophily. It has long stalked stigma. It reaches till the surface. The pollens, anthers, not the pollens, the anthers are released. They come to the surface. Over there they burst. The pollens are released. Then passively they float to the unwettable stigma and pollination takes place. So these are the points that you have to keep in mind when you understand hydrophily. It's better you remember each and every point by heart.